Welcome to the Ask Me How I Know show. I'm your host, Julie Hulley, and I'm so excited you're here. Ask Me How I Know is the only podcast in the multifamily niche replicating what takes place outside the walls of a seminar. Remember when we used to get together like that? This is like the lobby where honest, unscripted conversations take place and transformation happens. We'll talk about practical problem solving in the multifamily niche as well as overcoming mental roadblocks. This episode is brought to you by 3 Keys Investments. 3 Keys Investments is dedicated to helping people like you, you, enter the multifamily investment space to build passive income and legacy wealth. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed Ask Me How I Know, I'd be honored if you did. Thanks so much for joining me today, and now for our featured guest. Hey guys, welcome back to Ask Me How I Know. I am so glad that you are here and joining us once again. I have a fantastic guest today, somebody who has closed a multifamily deal during COVID, no less. Matt, I feel like everyone should give you a standing ovation.
Oh,
welcome to
thank you.
Ask Me How I Know.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Happy to be here.
I'm super stoked to have you on the show. I am totally inspired by several people who have been able to wrestle down deals during this pandemic and not to be curved and dissuaded by it. So I would love to hear about how you pulled this off.
Yeah, so my team and I had actually sourced this deal. One of the people that's in my team had sourced this prior to the pandemic, just prior to the pandemic. And then we kind of went through all of this process of the pandemic started being a thing. And then, we had to kind of work through it. And we had, I feel like you have to be flexible because we found some things along the way that we just had to make some changes. And I think that deals are totally doable right now. You just have to be flexible and you have to be willing to do what it takes to make the deal get done.
So flexible, what kind of flexibility should people have right now if they want to go tackle a deal?
So you have to think about things such as, how you're going to do your due diligence, especially if you're in an area where people are still kind of locked down. A lot of people are not real happy with you going through their units. Contractors are very busy right now because a lot of people are doing work at their house. They've been locked up for a while and they're like, hey, I'm going to get somebody to do this deck that I've waited on forever. So you have to maybe price in a little bit more than you normally would on some of your repairs too, because these guys are so slammed that they know they can get premium prices. So you kind of have to figure that in a little bit. And then you just have to be very flexible with the idea of what's going to happen. And so I think if your numbers are conservative enough, truly conservative, then that gives you the flexibility to say, okay, I may have to, not make as much of a profit for a short period of time because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the government's going to say you can't evict anybody for a while if they don't pay. So those are the kind of things that you kind of have to plan that in there and bake that in there when you get started on one of these deals.
That's really an interesting point because I know that we've been looking through rent rolls meticulously and looking at, where are these residents' places of employment and how is that going to, when you're acquiring a property, you have to be looking at everything. Did you guys go down to the nitty gritty of that? A lot of times what was your play on the property? I guess that would be a good starting question.
Oh yeah.
Were you trying to fully reposition it or?
We were, it's a value add. So they were under market. It was the typical deal that just about everybody's looking for.
You found the unicorn?
Yeah, the unicorn. I found the unicorn. It was the retiring couple that had this place forever and they wanted to, get rid of it so they could, go right off into the sunset kind of deal. It was, not managed great. And, all of the units pretty much were under market, save for a few handful that they had just rented close to market, I guess, to prove the concept that it could be done. So I feel like that the real play for us was a value add. That was from the very beginning. And so, that's kind of just what we went with was get it bring it up to market. The thing that we all look for, basically. I don't know a better way to say that.
Right. You're like well, and you guys were looking at it pre-COVID, pre-pandemic,
Yes, yes.
pre-everything. So were you banking on when you guys first underwrote it, were you banking on being able to raise the rents?
We were from the very beginning, and not as much raise the current rents, but more so maybe slowly raise some of the ones. Most of the people in our units were already not in contract. They were out of their lease. So it was a matter of getting them to release at maybe slightly higher rates. And then I know we have a few people leave through attrition. And as they leave, renovate those units and bring them up to market. And then hopefully the goal was originally to take some of the people that are in the other units. And once we fix them up, kind of showcase them and say, hey, look, here we have these nicer units. If you want to move over to one of these, then you get somebody to move out of one, you renovate theirs and rinse and repeat. So that was kind of the goal from the beginning, was to do that. And then that's where the flexibility comes in because of COVID. A lot of people, there's just a lot more situations and a lot more nuance that you kind of have to prepare yourself for. But we re-underwrote after when COVID started and planned on higher vacancy for our break even, and then we actually renegotiated our price and got a little bit of a discount because of it, and it's worked
So
out well.
nice, nice. So how was that renegotiation process? Because some people, I've heard some different stories on how that's gone down recently. Where did they have any clue as to how bad this could be? And
So when we renegotiated, it was at the beginning of it was in March, so it was closer to the beginning of this, and it was an older couple, and they were kind of like, oh, it's they're out there elbow bumping us, not shaking hands, but then when we say something about renegotiation, they're just like, oh, I think this is just all a hoax and all this stuff. So I'm like, no, it's not a hoax. There's people, there's things that are going to happen, and we have to account for that, and we have to be careful with how we're buying the property because we could lose money, and then all your residents here that you care about, we won't be able to keep up the standard that you would want for them, and we won't be able to keep this place up in general. So we need a little bit of a discount for uncertainty, and if you were on our shoes, you would want the same thing. So we just had to come to them with a lot of factual stuff. Here's what the treasury is saying. Here's what these people are saying about how many people are going to lose their jobs and blah, blah, blah. And just basically say, matter of fact, if we leave, if we walk, there may not be somebody else that comes in that's going to pay what we pay. And you have no guarantee of that. And then you have to start this process over. And do you really want to do that?
that's interesting. I remember being in, single family realtor Julie days and during the Great Recession. And I remember literally having that conversation with my seller saying, hey, the writing's on the wall. I mean, having been raised in real estate and, watching the cycles, I'm like, the writing's on the wall. If you don't take this, like exactly that situation, and this could be granted, and it did save that person almost six figures by taking the offer. I mean, you're leaving money on the table if you're not selling at the right time. What
Right.
advice would you have to sellers right now at this stage? Now we're in, a lot of states are reopening. We've got a lot of different plans going on. We're deep into the pandemic.
Are you saying
What
for buyers?
like
For buyers
for
or
their
sellers?
their mentality for
For
sellers?
sellers,
What
I'd
would you
say make the
say
price
to
so that I can buy all your property.
well, and Matt will be partnering up on that. Okay. No, but would you have any advice for sellers?
um, be realistic. Now, although I say that, and it's hard to tell them to come down to earth and be realistic because people are willing still to overpay right now, and it makes it very difficult for me to tell people, "Hey, be realistic." I mean, what are they going to do? Cut their prices when people are willing to pay them? I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. But it depends on what your property is. If you have, a C minus property, you're probably going to have to be a lot more realistic because people are going to start being more cautious, especially depending on what way the wind blows on the news with what the government's going to do that day.
Oh goodness. Well, speaking to sellers, now let's speak to buyers a little bit. What would any advice that you would have specifically for buyers right now?
I would say patience is a virtue. Don't overpay just because, don't fall in love with any of these properties and overpay. And I would say be conservative, like truly conservative. Don't just say, "Oh, I've underwritten this conservative," and it's really close to your best your best shot at it, like what you think is going to be the best, and you knock off 5%. No, don't do that because you put yourself in a bad position. And if something, like I said, comes along with the government and they make it to where you can't evict people, you've got to think, what are you going to do if your people all just decide, hey, you know what? Uncle Sam said I don't have to pay, and I'm not going to. What are you going to do at that point? So be realistic, be conservative, and be patient.
That's really great advice. Do you guys have a plan in place? This is, I'm not sure what you guys have discussed, but if we go through a shutdown again, this is pre-elections. This is being recorded before the
Yes.
elections. I hear some chatter out there about, maybe potentially more shutdowns and things like that, depending on which way all of the elections turn out. I mean, if they were to shut everyone down again, you're the first operator I've asked this to, do you guys have a play as to what you would do with your residents? Is everybody stable enough, or how are you gauging that?
Most of our residents are fairly stable. So, I think there are in society there are always people that are going to take advantage of a situation. And there are going to be some
Always.
people that take advantage if they're told, hey, these people can't evict you for not paying your rent. There are going to be some people that just take that as don't pay your rent.
Free
so
rent, woo!
but I think if you the biggest thing that we are making sure of is, especially on the ones that we have control over, and when I say we have control over any new people that are being brought in, we're
Yeah.
being extra careful to make sure that these people are stable and not just getting people on the margins or people on the fringe that are maybe barely qualify or don't really qualify. So we're just being very careful about vetting people and making sure that the people that are not going to be the types that are going to say, I'm just not going to pay my rent. That that's what we're so that's for us. The big thing is because really at this point, that's about the only way you can protect yourself. That and have
Yeah.
be again flexible with your residents as well. So you can, try to work out payment plans or try to help them find relief in different from agencies and things such in that nature. Um, that's the other thing that you can do is be preemptive on that kind of stuff. Don't wait until it's a problem. Put that out there beforehand.
Preventative measures are they're just worth so much. All right, Matt. Well, shifting gears a little bit, I'm wondering, you have a broad background just as I do, and I find that my background has really been a tremendous skill set to draw upon. And I'm wondering about how you have reinvented yourself over, the years, and how that's helped with multifamily investing.
Right. Sure. So for me, I started out I worked for Carrier and actually did building automation programming. So I was in a lot of these big buildings for a while. And then after that, I got into commercial real estate, as in offices. So I did property management and I worked in that for a while. And then I started acquiring real estate. And then commercial real estate rather. And then I just decided, you know what, I like this multifamily stuff. I started looking into it, and I'm one of those people that I'm a firm believer. If you like something, you just kind of dig into it. I mean, and we have so many resources now. You have YouTube and books and podcasts and everything else. If you are interested in something like this, I think you just basically have to time shift from what you're doing and set aside time to do this stuff. And so that's all of that stuff to say, all of that stuff kind of played into me kind of getting into this. It was kind of one thing to the next thing to the next thing to where, now I've gotten into this and I've just stayed with this because I love it.
It's really interesting, like even having a background in property management. Does that make you scrutinize property managers a little more?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Because I always look at it like I would do it this way. And I think the thing with a property manager, I think what a lot of people don't realize is, we're all told, oh, when you start learning about this, people are told, oh, well, make sure the property manager's good, and you're kind of like, yeah, 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 yeah. I'm sure they're all going to be good. And then you go get a property manager, and when they're not doing good, you start realizing really quick that they're not good with communication or this or that or the other. I'm the type that I want somebody to come to me with something. Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. If something's going on, I want to get a property manager that can just handle stuff to where I take care of the high level stuff. I say yay or nay or whatever. And when you've done this before, done the property management side before, it does make you take a little bit harder look at that. And sometimes I have to step back and go, okay, am I being too harsh? Because I would have done it a different way. But
Right.
it generally works out. I just try to communicate what my needs are and what I feel like I expect out of the property manager. And if they are professional at all, they'll understand that and they'll make adjustments accordingly.
Those adjustments are necessary for
Oh, for
sure.
sure.
But even just ironing out that relationship, sometimes different communication styles and everything. Well, as we're thinking about people who would like to make a shift in their life, I think that you and I can both relate that there are people out there and they feel stuck and they want to unstick themselves, right? Like they want to move on in life, but
Hmm.
maybe fear's holding them back or they don't know. Like, what advice would you have for somebody that wants to make a transition? It might be to multifamily, it might be to something else.
Hmm.
How do they do that?